Well, thank you for joining us for the webinar today. I am Angela Koppel, the EMAC Program Director at the National Emergency Management Association, or NEMA. We also have Angela Leek, Bill Irwin, and Louis Garcia on the webinar today. There is a copy of the slides in the handouts in the webinar panel. You can navigate and download it from there, and we'll also send you a copy at the end of the presentation. Typically, when an incident occurs at the local level and they need outside resources to assist, the resource request goes to the State Emergency Management Agency to source resources. One of the tools in the state toolbox is EMAC, or the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. EMAC is a nationally adopted mutual aid agreement enacted by all 50 states, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the District of Columbia, Guam, and the Northern Mariana. As required by Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which states that compacts, to be effective and have the full force of law, must be passed by the U.S. Congress, EMAC was enacted as Public Law 104321 in 1996. EMAC facilitates the sharing of resources across state lines during times of emergency or disaster. EMAC does not have resources. We simply leverage the resources within states for national response. One of the most common questions I get is, can this resource be shared or deployed through EMAC? That's actually the question I got from Angela Leek when she started to talk to me about ROS. When I think of ROS, I think of the fire service. This is the other ROS, the Radiological Operations Support Specialist, and other radiological positions that can be leveraged through EMAC. I'm going to turn it over to Bill and Louis for an overview of ROS.
Thank you, Angela. Really appreciate a couple of things. First, appreciate you putting this together. I think this is an important element to really look at the resource from a radiological point of view that we've developed over the last few years. And you know, it is an element where we're trying to bridge emergency management and some. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and Bill Irwin will go through that. So if you can go into the next slide, please. From one of the elements that we've looked at, and you know, this goes back to an analysis that we did after several exercises that we did. Really showing the need for subject matter expertise when it came to radiological incidents. There's a lot of radiological expertise. There's a lot of individuals there, but there really wasn't a connection to the emergency management component. And we'll go into that in a process. So as we were going through those elements, that's one of the things that we identified as a gap for the work that we needed to do. So in assessments of readiness and radiological and nuclear incident response capabilities, and that's when we developed the ROS training course. Now it's put together by several elements and at all levels of government. So we looked at FEMA, DHS S&T with the National Urban Security Technology Laboratories, or NUSTEEL, DOE and NSA, and then a partnership with our state and local components, specifically representatives from the CRCPD, or the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors. So that really gave us an opportunity to look at how we would be able to incorporate the subject matter expertise from a federal level, as we looked at research and development and some of the support that we received from NUSTEEL. Then that subject matter expertise that we would look at and bringing the elements together to ensure that all levels of government would really have an understanding and really address the gap that the radiological operations support specialists would be able to fill. So as we look at that, and as I mentioned, it is bridging that subject matter expertise, the science with emergency management. One of the things that I normally say, and please, for the folks on the phone, don't take this as a negative comment. But what we really learned was that it's easier to teach subject matter expert science rated individuals, teaching them emergency management, than it is really to teach an emergency manager or responder the science of radiation. So when we were able to bring both those elements together as part of the Ross training course and all of the other materials that go along with that, it really gave us an opportunity to close that gap. So with that in mind, Bill, if you can take over the presentation and continue on with the slides.
Great, thanks, Louis. So after the Ross were identified as participants in exercises starting in 2014 and each year at Vibrant Response nuclear detonation exercises, Gotham Shield, at Southern Exposure, a nuclear power plant exercise, and others, there were people who followed the Ross in each of these exercises and created after-action reports. Those after-action reports and then a job task analysis that was conducted with people who would likely need radiological operations support specialists and people who would likely want to become Ross were polled in a series of national conferences and other activities to find out what really was needed and what ought to be incorporated into the next task, which was training objectives and lesson plans. Those training objectives and lesson plans were then put into action with a class in 2016 for the first Ross, a second class sponsored by the CDC in Atlanta in 2017, and then 3 more pilot courses, and now the permanent residents for the Ross training course, Counterterrorism Operations Support, out of the Nevada test site, where they taught 3 courses in 2018. Over the course of that time, they were then we then took each of the individuals who completed that training, evaluated their skills, knowledge, and abilities in comparison to the FEMA recently in September 2019 position qualification and position task book, and assessed those trainees and assigned them as Ross Type 1, 2, and 3. And this was done just last year around September. We now have 102 of these individuals across the country. So this is a breakdown of the 102 types. There are 16 Type 1. These are people who are able to provide guidance to any and all level of government in the incident command, incident management team. We have 6 in the region 1, 4 in region 2, a large group in the National Capital Region, 36 there, 20 in the region 4, and you can see across the Midwest and West, we have significant numbers. But our goal is to have 1 or 2 Ross in every state, with more in the bigger states, and they would be engaged in radiological nuclear emergency planning and training within that jurisdiction that has them. And we're working to develop that relationship between the radiation control program directors in the states, the Ross themselves, and emergency management agencies. And then if there were an incident that exhausted the supply of those kinds of subject matter experts in a particular jurisdiction, obviously they could use EMAC to request mutual aid and get Ross from other regions. Next slide, please. So that's the Ross in a nutshell. We have much more to offer. If you go to the CRCPD, the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors at crcpd.gov, .org, you can look on the Homeland Security Emergency Response section for the ROS portal. We have a fact sheet for the ROS and other information. Would you like more about the ROS? And I'll leave it to Louis to close this out.
Sure. Thank you, Bill. You know, and the important thing about this is, you know, we've done a lot of work. We've done a lot of work in the development of the program with partnerships, expanding how we really develop different components for the individuals that are interested in ROS. And this call today and the work that we're doing with Angela Capo and NEMA and EMAC is really expanding the resource that we're making available to our state and local partners. One of the important elements is really looking at how we use these individuals, because these individuals are not only used for the response element, and it is important to really understand and really have these individuals provide guidance, for lack of a better description, to emergency managers to really understand what it means when there is a certain topic or a certain comment that is made regarding radiation, and having these individuals be able to translate that. But in a more, or just as important element, is using the radiological operations support specialists in a preparedness role, really helping in the development of plans, really helping in the development of exercises as we look at not only nuclear power plants, but also looking at, for example, the RDD component, the radiological dispersal devices, or INDs. The improvised nuclear devices, and really having an individual that understands not only the science, but what to incorporate into those plans and what to incorporate into emergency management. And now the next step is, and Angela, I'll turn it to you after my comment here, is really allowing states through the Emergency Management Assistance Compact to really, if you currently don't have an individual ROS within your state, and as Bill mentioned, we have 100, but there are gaps across the country, and we want to close those gaps. But in the meantime, for those emergency managers on the call, you'll have an opportunity to really work with us and work with the neighboring state to really get that resource to be able to help you in developing your program within your state. So with that in mind.
Right, thank you. So I know when you see the words EMAC and law together, your eyes probably start to glaze over, but fear not. Today we're going to cover them very quickly. We're going to see how the 13 articles of EMAC law make the compact flexible and incredibly powerful. Article 1 of EMAC law says that to receive resources through EMAC, a governor must have declared an emergency or disaster. The reason for that is very simple. It often triggers the state's ability to spend money. It also says that you can exercise EMAC without a declaration. So you can send resources from state to state on an exercise without a declaration. Article 2 makes very clear that states are to develop enabling mechanisms to share non-state resources, cities, counties, volunteers, and if state law allows, even private sector resources alongside state resources. It also says that the state emergency management director, i.e. the state emergency management agency, will be responsible for implementing EMAC on behalf of the governor of the state. Article 3 details out the responsibilities of EMAC member states. So the State Emergency Management Agency is responsible for conducting hazard analysis, developing plans and procedures, working with resource providers in their states to develop and maintain their resource inventory, conduct shortfall analysis, resource allocation, and much more. Article 4 says that states can withhold resources if they are needed at home. So if there is a disaster at home and you get a request, you don't have to send the resources out of state if they are needed at home. It also says that your powers, except those of arrest, transfer to the requesting state. To have the powers of arrest, we have to swear officers in upon arrival in the requesting state by that proper authority. Importantly, it says while deployed, you are under the command and control of your home state authority, but under the operational control of the receiving entity. So you are a temporary agent of the requesting state while you're deployed there. And because you are under the command and control of your home agency, if you are needed at home, even in the middle of your deployment, you could be recalled back home, and that's okay. Article 5 says your state-issued license, certificate, or permit is deemed licensed, certified, and permitted in the requesting state. A state licensing board cannot override EMAC law. Only a governor's executive order could do that. But there are differences in standards of practice and job titles which change between jurisdictions and states. So it's really important, if possible, to use NIMS resource typing and clear language in both requests and offers to ensure when you're asking for a Gala apple, you get a Gala apple, not a Macintosh. Article 6 says that while you're on an EMAC deployment, you are considered an agent of the requesting state. We talked about that before, but that also extends to tort liability and immunity, so long as you are acting in good faith. Article 7 allows for supplemental agreements. There are a lot of examples of supplemental agreements. It's typically an agreement that enables local resources to deploy through EMAC, or an agreement that expedites the movement of EMAC resources between states. A really good example of this is Region 6 has a plan called the IERSP, or the Interstate Emergency Response Plan. It allows for the automatic deployment of EMAC resources in a large-scale disaster. So states within the region have done the pre-planning, know exactly what triggers these deployments, and then using mission-ready packages, they know upfront the costs and can pre-plan the incidents in EMAC's Resource Planner. So we have an application where you can pre-script your incidents out, you can pre-script the resource requests, and you can link those resource requests to mission-ready packages. So when you actually have that incident occur, you can go into the EMAC operations system, click a few buttons, import that entire incident, and it will pre-populate the system with the resource requests and the offers of assistance. Article 8 states that workers' compensation benefits are the responsibility of the assisting state, the home state, and cannot be billed back to the requesting state. Article 9 addresses reimbursement. It simply states that mission-related eligible expenses will be reimbursed. It also states that you can donate some or all of the mission to the requesting state in the true spirit of mutual aid. The most common implementation of this, not charging for regular salary time, only charging for overtime and travel expenses. One of the most common misconceptions about reimbursement is that it is slow. During Hurricane Maria and Irma, I actually conducted a pretty in-depth analysis of the reimbursement process to figure out where the slowdowns occur. And I was very surprised to discover that the single biggest issue we have is the initial submission of the reimbursement package. So over a year after the hurricanes had made landfall, over 73% of the reimbursement packages had not even been submitted yet. We are currently working on standardizing the reimbursement forms between states to help expedite that review process and the initial data collection process. But clearly, if the initial submission of the reimbursement package is where it's the slowest, that's as soon as people get home from their EMAC deployment, they need to gather up all of their paperwork, submit it to their home agency, and then get that reimbursement package submitted so it can get paid. I think it was New Jersey who, on average, paid people out within 7 to 9 days of receipt of the reimbursement package. So I think it's enlightening to see where the slowdown really was occurring, which was at the very beginning. Article 10 addresses evacuation, lays out the transportation, provisions of services and goods, registration, reception for friends and family, and repatriation. Article 11 defines when the compact shall be effective. It was actually effective shortly after it was signed into law because a hurricane impacted the state of Mississippi shortly after being signed into law. Article 12 is the big disclaimer. You have to always have a good disclaimer in anything you write, which states that if any provision of the compact is found to be unconstitutional, the remainder shall remain in effect. Article 13 states that the National Guard cannot be used as a military force when deployed through EMAC. So as you can see, the 13 Articles of Agreement are powerful, but very flexible. What isn't in the law are the procedures that we use to implement the compact. All of EMAC's procedures are developed by the state emergency management agencies, as they are legally responsible for implementing the compact. Because the National Emergency Management Association, or NEMA, is the Association of State Emergency Management Directors, who by law are responsible for implementing EMAC, in 1995, NEMA, the association, was asked to administer EMAC. The governance structure of EMAC is through committees. The State Emergency Management Directors on the EMAC committee oversee the compact with input from the EMAC Advisory Group, a national organization to provide feedback to improve the implementation of EMAC. The Executive Task Force is one of the more vital roles in the governance of EMAC. It has one EMAC representative from each of the FEMA regions. It has 3 leadership positions and 3 members at large from state emergency management, along with a legal counsel liaison. The chair of the EMAC Executive Task Force also serves in a dual role as the lead for the National Coordinating State, which is one of the EMAC operational components. As the lead for the National Coordinating State, it ensures that every year, one state has operational oversight over all of the EMAC operations. And also there is a structure behind EMAC to provide resource coordination, both at the state level and liaisons to share situational awareness at the national level. This backbone of EMAC is perhaps one of the reasons why EMAC has been so successful. The states take a very active role in the implementation of the compact, with NEMA serving as full-time staff support. There are 5 phases of the EMAC process. The first phase is pre-event preparation. This is where all of the pre-mission activities take place for both requesting and assisting entities. It includes the development of plans and procedures, conducting training and exercises, and of course, developing mission-ready packages. And I'll note that it occurs at all levels. So it's not just the state doing this. It should be the resource providers and the local entities working with the states to make sure their plans and procedures are developed, that they've trained and exercised, and that they've developed mission-ready packages. So what is a mission-ready package? An MRP, or a mission-ready package, is everything you need to conduct a mission organized into a single package. The goal of the mission-ready package was to reduce the time frame from request to deployment, while ensuring resources leave the state with everything that they need to be successful on their mission. If we look at an example of a mission-ready package, this mission-ready package is for debris removal. You'll see the MRP includes the equipment, along with the NIMS resource type identified, personnel, commodities, meals, travel, lodging, and other, all of which have costs associated to each of the categories. Once an MRP is developed, exercising that MRP can help to identify areas that we're missing and ensure that everything that you need to go out on that deployment is included in that mission-ready package, and therefore will also be included in the cost estimate. That's really important because the cost estimate has a direct relationship to reimbursement. The cost estimate for many of these categories, like equipment rates and personnel rates, are pretty easy to gather. Your finance people should have that information. You can also estimate the travel costs based on locations you've identified during your pre-event planning, or you can wait until you know where you're going and then quickly add those in. On average, EMAC missions are usually about 14 days with travel on each end, but they can be longer or shorter. I would suggest working with your own subject matter experts to identify the ideal deployment time frame for your missions, and then develop your mission-ready packages based on that feedback. A mission-ready package can be built within the Mutual Aid Support System. That is our free online GIS-based inventory system of mission-ready packages, or you can develop it on one of our Excel templates and then with the click of a button, upload it into MAS. Having it in MAS is important because it can be leveraged across the entire EMAC system once it's in there. States can use it for pre-event planning. They can use it in that application that I talked about early, Resource Planner, where they can link that mission-ready package to a pre-scripted resource request. And then all of that could, of course, can be imported into the EMAC operation system with a click of a button during an actual incident. To get started with building your mission ready package in MAS, simply go to the EMAC website and set up your EMAC account, navigate to MAS. And once you're in MAS, you'll see a screen similar to this one. You'll see the MRPs that you have in the system, the number that you have published to the state, the number you have published to the EMAC inventory, the ones that are unpublished. You'll see a breakdown by discipline. You'll see them on the map. Adding an MRP to the EMAC inventory makes it visible across the EMAC system. So it makes it where it can be leveraged in Resource Planner. It can be also used to submit an offer of assistance in the EMAC operation system. You'll also see your state EMAC coordinator's contact information in the upper right side, where the purple text there is. You'll actually see the name and contact information for your state EMAC coordinator. When you click to edit or add a new MRP in the system, you'll see a screen that looks very much like this one, where you'll see all the sections of the mission ready package laid out as tabs. You can simply walk through each one, adding your own content. It's super fast and super easy. We do conduct workshops on mission ready package development. If you're interested, I can be sure to get you an invitation to one of our upcoming virtual workshops. It will walk you through each of the tabs and all of the data that goes into each of the fields. The activation phase of EMAC is where the requesting state's governor would declare a disaster or emergency, and the requesting state would open an event in the EMAC operation system. In the request and offer phase of EMAC, the requesting state details the resource needed in the EMAC operation system, or if they have a pre-planned event, they can simply import it from Resource Planner. They share that request to potential assisting states. Again, this is all done between the state emergency management agencies. If that state has completed their pre-event planning, the request is likely only going to 1 or 2 states as a private resource request. That means only those states can see it. So if in Kentucky I shared a private resource request to Tennessee and Florida, only those states would see it when they go into the EMAC operation system. The potential assisting state emergency management agency will check to determine if their state can help, and if so, they'll reach out to the resource provider within their state to determine if they can provide assistance. Again, EMAC doesn't own the resources. It's the system to move the resources. If that resource provider indicates they can help, an offer of assistance is submitted through the EMAC operation system. Again, if that resource provider has developed their mission ready package in MAS, it's simply a matter of updating the MRP in the system and then importing it over into the EOS with just a click of a button. It just takes a minute. This is really why having a mission ready package before it's needed is so incredibly crucial. It can just take a few minutes to submit your cost estimate if you put the work into creating the mission ready package before the event occurs. It saves a ton of time versus getting the resource request and then having to make up that cost estimate on the fly. The requesting state will review that offer and determine if they will accept or decline it. Once that offer is accepted, the assisting state receives a notification that the offer has been accepted and asks them to complete the resource support agreement. The resource support agreement, or the RSA, is the legally binding document that between those 2 states for that single mission. There is 1 RSA per mission in the EMAC operation system. The RSA is also the basis for reimbursement. And once the RSA is completed, the resource provider will be sent an EMAC mission order authorization form, or a mission order as we often call it. It is their official EMAC deployment order. As resources prepare to deploy, they're in the mobilization stage of the response. As part of mobilization, all deploying personnel should receive a pre-deployment briefing, which provides details about the mission, safety instructions, reimbursement tracking information, and of course, who they should contact if they need help. While on the deployment, personnel are, as you'll recall, under the operational controls of the authority that they're working under and under the command and control of their home state. Should they have any issues or changes to cost estimates, they should immediately be reported to their home state emergency management agency so they can amend that mission. Keeping the estimated costs aligned with reality expedites the reimbursement process as everybody has agreed up front on what's eligible. During demobilization, personnel will of course travel home. And then once they arrive home, or if on a virtual mission, the mission is completed, they should submit all of their receipts, travel logs, everything that they have to their home agency. The home agency will then compile that reimbursement package along with salary information, equipment rates, everything that they need, who then submits that to the assisting state. The assisting state will complete their audit, resolve any issues, and then submit that to the requesting state. The payment goes in the opposite direction from the requesting state back down. One item of note on reimbursements, the cost in the mission ready package are estimates. When you have completed the mission, the actual costs are what are submitted for reimbursement, and you must have the documentation to support those costs. If there are deviations in the cost categories or significant cost differences, we do like to see amendments to the Resource Support Agreement or the RSA, just so it clarifies what's coming. Eligible costs include personnel, travel, lodging, meals, equipment, commodities, and other. It's very flexible in terms of what is eligible so long as the states have agreed on what is in the reimbursement package through that RSA agreement. And of course, everything must be documented. Oftentimes, I'll see examples of reimbursement packages that have been submitted that are not well put together. And I like to say, if I, going on a trip for my business for NEMA, and I came home and I compiled my reimbursement packages and submitted it to my own agency to get reimbursed for it, it's very much the same thing as submitting an EMAC reimbursement package. I'm not going to be able to submit reimbursement for the drink that I had in the bar or, something like those lines, but for my per diem rates, my lodging, my travel, all of that is eligible for reimbursement. Ineligible costs include personal items, workers' compensation claims, and items that are outside the duty dates. Reimbursement for EMAC missions are not contingent upon a federal disaster declaration or receipt of federal funds. The state is responsible for repayment of EMAC missions whether or not they have received federal dollars. We have many online training courses. I encourage you to take the pre-event preparation for resource providers. It walks through the development of mission-ready packages, and then follow that up with taking the course EMAC Just-in-Time Training for Deploying Personnel to learn more about what you need to know while you're on an EMAC mission, including some great reimbursement guidance. We also have an EMAC app that you can download from the Apple or the Android store. The app provides guidance and tips and assumes you are either leaving on or on an EMAC mission. So I'm going to open it up for my questions, for myself, Angela, Bill, and Lewis. If you have a question, please type it into the questions pane.
And Angela, while you're waiting to see some of the questions there, this is Lewis. One of the important elements for us at FEMA in working together with NEMA, EMAC, and working with the states is to be able to look at gaps, to be able to identify, those needs for those really unique type of incidents. And chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incidents are those types of events that we really don't plan for in detail. Or have an opportunity to respond, especially from a revenue perspective. And some of the things that we're doing here and some of the information that Angela Koppel just went through is very important for the for whole of community to really start identifying and start working towards streamlining how we get resources and radiological resources, subject matter expertise from from locality to locality, state to state, region to state, so on and so forth. We're actually working and developing other operation support specialist positions in the chemical realm as well as the biological. Chemical is coming up more sooner than later. We just initiated the bio component, the biological operations support specialist, and it'll be the same process, same concept. How can we build a resource, a human resource that's going to be beneficial to those emergency managers at any level? We have currently ROSs, I think Bill had mentioned this, we have ROSs at the federal level, we have ROSs that come from the state level and local level. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the future to really develop this program. And the reason that we're having this conversation today, it's all about preparedness, especially for our radiological subject matter experts, those individuals that manage or work in a radiation control program. How are we able to build the types of resources that are going to be beneficial in the future? So you know, a lot of things are going to be, this is just one of the first steps of many that we'll take into the future. Bill, I think you can talk a little bit about the position or the information, the guidance that we're trying to provide at the state level for the management of ROSs in a particular state. So I see the first question there, so I'll shut up now for a little bit.
Well, the only question I see so far is we have ROS who work for state government, some for federal government, and some in the private sector. Can they all work with their state EMAC coordinator to put together a mission-ready package? So to quickly answer that question, EMAC does not deploy federal resources. It is state resources, local resources. So you probably could develop a mission-ready package, but for the federal government, it would not be deployed through EMAC.
Yeah, that's correct. And for the federal component, you know, depending on what's been exceeded through the EMAC process, and if there is a staff declaration, then we can provide mission assignments to be able to support a state to provide additional resources. Hence the importance of working together, local, state, regional, and federal entities. You know, as we look at really expanding the ROS program, one of the things that we're doing at FEMA is being able to work with our regions. It's really, really important to start putting those teams together, those resources at a regional level, well, starting local, followed by state, and then the regions, to be able to have those entities work together, have the states within a particular FEMA region work together, and have an understanding of how those positions will be used. So there is a difference, but similarities as we look at federal radiological operations support specialist positions, as well as going through EMAC. Over.
Great. So our next question is for Bill, or probably Angela could also answer it. As I understood what you presented, the state ROS coordinators would work with their state EMAC coordinator. Is that correct?
But yes, that is the idea. As we're growing the state ROS coordinator position, which is a new ask that we're having the radiation control program directors help us to identify. As we get those individuals identified, what we're hoping is that they can keep visualization on the ROS that are within their state and help communicate with the EMAC coordinator. So if a request did need to be made, that EMAC coordinator would know who to reach to know who and where they can get those resources from.
All right, and Craig asks, I am new to ROS. How do I contact my local ROS?
So right now, we are still establishing the ROS coordinators. So those people are not yet identified. So if you do want to reach out to find out who to talk to about ROS within your state right now, reach out to Bill, Lewis, or I, and we can help to communicate with the right group of people and get you plugged in to the right area.
I think that goes along with, can can you produce a list of the 11 or the 10 FEMA regions that have a local ROS and basically a point of contact for each for establishing relationships?
Yeah,
I'm assuming that that's probably in development.
Yeah, it is. And we do have, at least from a regional perspective, we've identified individuals, at least, like I said, FEMA regions, individuals that are assigned as CBRN regional coordinators, and will have the opportunity to coordinate and collaborate with those individuals within the state. So we can do that. We can also provide the list of, at least for the states on the emergency management side, give you an understanding of who within your state is already identified as a ROS. You know, the other important element related to that is to be proactive. You know, reach out if you're a ROS that's on the call, and you want to get together with your radiation control folks, but also reaching out to the emergency management folks and that EMAC coordinator. You know, that's going to go a long way just to start the conversation, to really have an understanding of how we can bring those elements together and really strengthen a state and importantly a region to be able to identify and look at the things that we can do in the near term, and then in the longer element of the development of this program, especially as we start identifying ROS coordinators for the states.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that a little bit. You know, the work that's been done with the ROS program and kind of building the position task books and getting the positions actually codified into the National Integration Center with the 509. That has all been kind of done centrally, and this is a big important step for us to reach out into the states and start to have states grow their ROS communities within each state. So this kind of understanding how the EMAC would help to support in a real incident and or practicing during trainings or exercises, I think helps to open that communication between emergency management who might want to use a ROS, the avenue in which we can request the ROS, and then the ROS themselves with the radiation control program directors, and getting that whole community together to start figuring out what should ROS look like in your state. How is it best to organize the communication between all of these entities with the ROS program at FEMA CBRN's level, helping to coordinate and keep everybody consistent and on the same page across the nation. But this is really kind of that first step. So any like Lewis said, proactive attempts that you guys want to take within your state to, you know, kind of embrace this coordination would be very welcome, and we'd be happy to support that.
Excellent. So I have a question that I can answer. I heard that response duration was 14 days. Radiation emergencies would be long in duration. Can the 14-day deployment be extended, or can responders return 2 or 3 times? So the average EMAC deployment is usually about 14 days. It can be longer, it can be shorter. So yes, you can absolutely return as many times as needed. Typically what we do is we set up rotations for every 14 days. So people come in, they work 14 days and they go home. They can return. But typically when you're going out EMAC deployment, 14 days is kind of the average, just based upon how long your boss wants you to be gone, and kind of you don't want to hit burnout while you're on a deployment. So 14 days seems to be a pretty good time frame. And we have had EMAC missions that are as long as I think 3 or 6 months. So pretty unusual, but it is possible.
And Angela, correct me if I'm wrong. If they're there for 3 to 6 months, they need to start paying taxes in that particular state, right?
You'd think. Yeah, those are pretty unusual. Those were more utility missions than your typical EMAC mission. I'll open it up to Bill, Lewis, and Angela if they have anything they want to say in closing.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, fortunately, if you haven't downloaded the handouts and the presentation, please do so. There's a lot of great information that Angela Koppel presented, especially with those online training sessions, the opportunity to help you develop those mission-ready packages, and then from a Ross perspective, from the program, you have my email, you have the Ross email. Feel free to reach out to us. You know, we're more than willing to assist in your states or in your localities, really enhance what you're trying to do with the radiological program and with the Rosses, and then being able to support emergency management. Even beyond that, as we look at preparedness elements, as you look at developing radiological plans. Not all states and not all localities have those. You know, those that have nuclear power plants, of course, that is a requirement. But if you don't have a nuclear power plant, you know, there's new laws that are going to be coming into play as we look at small modular reactors that you may end up having in your particular jurisdiction, where a Ross would be able to help. So you know, keep all that information. We shared a lot today. Angela Koppel shared a lot of great information regarding EMAC. You know, keep that in mind and reach out to us so we would be able to help you as best we can. Really expand the work that you're doing within your state when it comes to radiation programs.
Sorry, I live in Vermont and snow has come down for third or fourth time this season and knocked the power out for a few minutes. Glad to have a backup there in Angela Leek from Iowa to keep the story going and answer some questions and provide some guidance. And that's really what the Ross is all about, is that here in Vermont, for example, we've had a nuclear power plant, and I've always been the one that the governor and the state emergency manager looked to for actionable guidance when we were dealing with the FEMA exercises. And I've always wanted to have 3 or 4 more people like myself that I could have at the most forward incident command post, the staging area, maybe at a reception center or elsewhere, and just didn't have them. And now we're training people not just for nuclear power plant accidents, but primarily for those, for radiological dispersal devices, and especially important, the worst, where really subject matter expertise at the state and local level is most short, the nuclear detonation response. And I know that I'm going to need that kind of help, just like I needed today, somebody to step in when my resources ran out here. And that's what we're hoping we can do in your jurisdiction and using the emergency mutual aid system when possible for training exercises, but also, of course, being available for actual incidents. And I think it's important for us to recognize we believe that in each jurisdiction, there are subject matter experts that can handle the typical things that are coming on. We're training Ross to handle the catastrophic incidents. They are able to come in there on something that is on the category of a pandemic, such as we're going through now in the biological world, or the Horizon drill platform spill as occurred in the Gulf of Mexico years ago, or as we had with Fukushima in Japan not too long ago. And of course, the worst, some sort of terrorist incident with a radiological dispersal device or a nuclear detonation. So, you know, we really find it a valuable resource to develop, and we appreciate your assistance in getting these Ross engaged in your jurisdiction and incorporated into mission-ready packages. I asked a question just before I got lost power here. I don't know if it was answered. We've got Ross who work in state government, and it seems like they're easy to get into mission-ready packages and use an EMAC. Can we do it for federal employees who are Ross, or Ross who are from the private sector? I'm not sure if you answered that. If you did, that's fine.
Yeah, Bill, and we did a little bit. I think we missed the private sector piece, but that would be an interesting answer. But from a federal perspective, it would be a similar process like EMAC, but it would be through mission assignments. So we have mission assignments that can be developed from a federal perspective and be able to support that. We also have, similar to the mission ready packages, we have pre-scripted mission assignments that we would use from a federal perspective. But going back to Angela Koppel, that is the question related to private sector. That is more at the state and local level. As we look at those individuals that are either hospitals or universities or things like that are ROSs, how do you tie that into the to the process that's used from an EMAC point of view?
So every state is different between their state laws. So you would have to determine whether or not that state can deploy private sector resources first and foremost. Some state laws do not allow the deployment of private sector resource because it would inhibit the private sector from them bidding on contracts in the states, or other laws that would prohibit them from doing that. So again, I would work with the state EMAC coordinator to determine whether or not that state can or cannot deploy private sector through EMAC. We do on our website have a good document that kind of reviews how to do it, a template agreement between them to do it. But I would work very closely with the EMAC coordinator for doing that.
Perfect.
Angela, did you have anything you wanted to close with?
Yeah, I just wanted to, circle back to some of what I said during one of the questions that was asked. We're excited to be bringing this community together, both from the ROS who might be deployed to those who might be requesting the ROS. So really encourage you guys to talk amongst each other within your states, figure out what the avenues look like. The EMAC coordinator is going to be a valuable resource to understand what can and can't be done within the state and start to see what that might need to look like. But do remember that we are here. We're here to help. If you as a private sector ROS find out that your state is one of those that doesn't have that integrated or can't, that's not the end of the road. We're going to try to figure out the best way to really leverage the great resources that we're building within the ROS community and all of the other operations support specialists as time goes on. So definitely take this opportunity to work amongst yourselves, but remember that the bigger picture of the operations support specialists are still working to make sure that we keep a network together and a net to keep everyone on the same page.
So in closing, I want to thank everyone for your time today. Some really great content shared out. I encourage you to contact your state EMAC coordinator to work on pre-planning. If you don't know your EMAC coordinator, you can obviously email us and we can hook you guys up. And I want to, of course, encourage you to take an online training course in the EMAC e-learning center, and feel free to contact me with any questions that you have. We do have a really short 5-question survey that's going to come up as we close the webinar to collect your feedback on how it went. And we appreciate your time. I know everyone's really busy, especially nowadays with COVID going on. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll close us off.
Okay. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Angela.